Overnight, it was bitterly cold across most of Texas, and most of the state will continue to experience sub-freezing temperatures for a few more nights. Tonight, it's anticipated that the entire state will be in a freezing or below freezing temperature situation. Importantly, though, the power grid continues to perform well at peak demand during this winter storm. Peak power demand was about 69,000 megawatts earlier this morning. We do not expect demand to exceed that amount for the rest of the storm. Very importantly, at the height of the power generation supply, more than 86,000 megawatts of power was available to serve demand on the grid. That's important because that far exceeds the estimated peak demand during last year's winter storm. ERCOT forecasted that peak demand during Winter Storm Uri was about 77,000 megawatts. That's about 9,000 megawatts less than this year's highest available power supply. The actions taken by the legislature, by the PUC, and by ERCOT have resulted in a stronger grid. The power grid's strength of position is a result of Texas having about 15% more power generation capacity than last year. It's a result of the winterization that protected power generation facilities across the state. It's also a result of the increase in power generators online because of improved maintenance schedules. It's also a result of the availability of alternative fuels for generators to use to generate power. It's also a result of having all participants in the power generation chain work collaboratively together to make sure that each component to get power to homes and to businesses across the state. As I said today, and I can say again today, the Texas electric grid is more reliable and more resilient than it's ever been. Now, I want to go over what ERCOT expects for the power demand and capacity for both today as well as tomorrow. Graph 1 shows, it's the one over here, Graph 1 shows expected power demand for the next 2 days, the power generation capacity that is expected, and a breakdown of the sources of that power, whether it be wind, solar, or thermal. It shows that there is plenty of power expected for both today as well as tomorrow. At the expected peak demand over the next 2 days, there should be about 17,000 megawatts of extra power capacity. That's enough extra power to supply more than 3 million homes across the state. This other graph shows the current demand for power in Texas at this time. The current demand is the bottom line, and then the top line is the current available capacity of power from the grid. The last I saw, it shows that there's about 15,000 megawatts of extra power over current demand, which again is about enough to fuel and power 3 million homes across the state. Also at this time, despite having abundant supply in the power grid in the state of Texas, there remain about 20,000 customers in Texas without power. And like we explained yesterday, the reason for that loss of power is obviously not because the power grid doesn't have the power that's needed. Instead, it's an issue at the local power provider level. Once again, the most probable cause of the lack of power for those customers is either wind knocking down power lines, or more likely, ice weighing down lines, or ice causing problems with trees that either trees or tree limbs would fall on power lines. I even saw one story yesterday where a vehicle ran into a power pole, knocking the power pole down, and knocking that power pole down resulted in a loss of power to an entire region. And what needed to be done was for the utility officials to be able to come out, remove the vehicle that ran into the power pole, erect a new power pole, and get power reinstalled. And so that just takes a while when incidents like this occur during the course of a storm like this. The good news is when we were here with you at this time yesterday, there were about 70,000 Texans without power, and now that number has been reduced to about 20,000 Texans. And that's a result of all these local officials and especially the utility companies working around the clock. I want to express my gratitude for the linemen who have been out in sub-freezing temperatures and ice 24/7, working all night long, all day long, in very inclement weather to make sure they get power restored. Anyone who loses power should call their local power provider. If you need help identifying your local power provider or getting their contact information, go to puc.texas.gov/storm. That's puc.texas.gov/storm. The agencies represented at the table will be telling you about new developments in what they are working on. I do want to emphasize that we still have more than 24 state agencies that are working 24/7 to help Texans be able to deal with and respond to this storm. That includes the Texas Military Department. They have over 125 personnel and 50 vehicles rostered and will continue to add more as needed. In addition to their operations around the state that I told you about yesterday, also yesterday, the Military Department assisted 10 stranded motorists and evacuated 5 personnel and assisted 2 emergency vehicles. They are also adding 5 wreckers to the Kerrville area to assist in the recovery in that area that you will hear more about from 2 other agencies shortly. On the Texas A&M Forest Service, they have been incredibly busy trying to clear ice off of roads to make roads more passable. As a few examples, they bladed about 60 miles of Interstate 20 near Abilene and assisted more than 200 motor vehicles and helped clear a 7-mile standstill that freed up 1,000 stopped motor vehicles yesterday. They added vehicles and personnel so that motor graders in that Abilene region can stay operational for 24 hours throughout this winter event. Also, the motor graders assigned to Brownwood are continuously blading a 48-mile stretch of Interstate 20 in both Eastland and Callahan counties. And yesterday, they helped remove 8 semi-trucks that were in a pileup, as well as, in doing so, preventing other vehicles from becoming a part of that pileup. And yesterday, the motor grader assigned to the San Angelo region bladed about 75 miles in that area, as well as the motor graders assigned to the Amarillo region bladed parts of Interstate 27 as well as service roads to that highway. That's all for the updated reports from these agencies. Next to the Chairman of the Public Utilities Commission.
Thank you, Governor. As you know, the grid was ready for this event. It is performing as expected, and it's more reliable than it has ever been. The historic reforms that we have implemented at the direction of the legislature and the governor mean that we have more power available than before, more backup for generators than before, and more reliability than ever before, especially in severe winter weather events like this. Our operational changes mean that we are operating with a conservative management approach on the grid. We have more power reserves, resulting in a bigger margin of safety, and we're using an abundance of caution by turning on more generators sooner rather than later. Our weatherization requirements mean that our generators meet and exceed federal winterization standards, and we're seeing the benefits of that during this winter storm. We've worked closely with the Railroad Commission to designate critical natural gas infrastructure to ensure gas continues to flow to our generators, and made many other resources available as part of our market reforms. Our generators and poles and wires companies have pre-positioned crews around the state to reduce the number of outages rapidly, as the governor stated. They have worked throughout the night to ensure that happens. The outages that we have seen are all local outages unrelated to any system issues or grid reliability issues, as you can see on the screens behind us. Continue to report outages to your local power providers by going to puc.texas.gov/storm. The grid remains strong, and it's more reliable than it has ever been. We implemented more reforms in a shorter amount of time than any other grid in the U.S. for winter storms like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the CEO of ERCOT, Brad Jones.
Thank you, Governor. Overnight, as you know, we hit our highest load of this winter event. In fact, it came early this morning. During that time, our generation and transmission partners in the grid have operated admirably. We have no confirmed outages of any equipment related to weather. So we believe that the weatherization preparations have been extraordinary and been very successful to date. We continue to see high this evening and tomorrow morning. So we will remain at our highest level of alert to our system called a watch. That watch Wednesday, we will continue that throughout several more days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Commissioner Craddock with the Texas Railroad Commission.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. The residential distribution companies and gas utilities still do not have any significant service interruptions to the residential customers and have additional support crews available. So your heat should be on, your gas should be on into your home. If you have an outage, though, contact your local supplier. In this morning's operator briefing, approximately 110 operations are continuing in the oil and gas world as usual, and they are responding to the current weather conditions and demands. The takeaway from our operator meeting this morning was that we are operating as expected with natural gas coming into the system. Fluctuations in production have been brief and expected. Operators recovered during the day yesterday and continue to work to resolve any issues through the night and going forward. Pipelines report that line pack of natural gas remains stable. As planned, underground storage draw continues to offset any production variances and increase demand. The system is working as it should. I want to thank the energy workers across the state who are working around the clock in freezing temperatures and below to keep the gas flowing in Texas. And thank you to our Railroad Commission team and the inspectors who are out on the ground as well. But gas is still flowing and the system is working.
Thank you. And next we have the Executive Director for TCEQ, Toby Baker.
Thank you, Governor. I'm happy to report that the impact on water systems across the state has been minimal. And but because of that, I do want to repeat what I said yesterday. We're going to have ongoing cold weather. So I expect that we will have more frozen pipes and you could be impacted. So please follow your local utility. If you see a line break in the street, please report it. Make sure you note the location of that so your utility can get out and fix that. If you have a break in your wall or in your yard, please turn the water off at the street. And if you don't know how to do that, go to our website, www.tceq.texas.gov, and we have a video that will show you how to do that. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you very much. Next we have the Executive Director for the Texas Department of Transportation, Mark Williams.
Thank you, Governor. Roads throughout the state continue to be icy, and we're working to fully address problem spots. We're continuing to deal with, in particular, some heavy areas of icing and really stubborn ice that is due to low temperatures and the ice accumulation that we have had over the past 24 to 48 hours. Our TxDOT crews have been working shifts continuously and assisted, as was noted, by our partner agencies around the state. We greatly do appreciate the assistance that we receive from our other team members. We've had, of our own personnel, about 4,000 TxDOT personnel engaged in about 3,500 pieces of equipment that have been utilized through the course of this event. As I mentioned, icy conditions are still prevalent. Some of the areas that are particular of note are bridges and elevated sections, as well as areas where you may have some steeper grades and there may be some challenges holding traction in those locations. One particular area of note has been I-10 over in Kerr County, where last night we had in the westbound direction a couple of trucks that got engaged into a crash. One of them jackknifed. It took some time to get the equipment out there to clear that crash location. As is typically unfortunate the case with these types of incidences, some additional crashes appear to have occurred in locations, and we've been working throughout the night to not only address moving those vehicles and trucks out of the way, but to also get the trucks that had backed up after those incidents to clear and to move out of the roadway. We've made some great progress. We've got a report this morning that at least one lane is open. We've got multiple crews on site being supported by our other agencies, and we expect to, in the coming hour or two, to have 2 lanes of traffic flowing again. But I want to continue to caution that we are not out of the woods. We are still dealing with dangerous roadway conditions. We expect to see problem areas and trouble spots reoccur as we go into freezing conditions. We're continuing to work to remind motorists to expect driving to be hazardous, really, for the next couple of days in locations. Avoid travel wherever possible. Give our personnel room to operate. We've had a number of pieces of equipment that were struck by third-party vehicles, and having to take those out of service, and directing personnel and agencies and citizens to the website drivetexas.org, where we work to keep the most up-to-date information available. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the Director of the Texas Department of Public Safety, Steve Mccrall.
Yeah, thank you, Governor. The Texas State Troopers responded to over 460 crashes since this incident began, resulting in 49 serious injuries and 3 deaths, unfortunately. We continue to encourage, if you don't have to drive, stay home. Stay off the roadways. If you must drive, please slow down. And if you approach a stranded motorist or a TxDOT vehicle on the side of the road, or a first responder, whether it's a DPS trooper or a local law enforcement official or first EMT operator, please slow down and move over. So slow even further down you normally would and move over. We would request that. I know we've had a number of TxDOT trucks. We haven't ended up working investigations based upon someone running into a TxDOT truck. It's not like you can miss one. Yet people are going too fast for the conditions and run into them when you go slide sideways. So that's a concern. We've got one trooper hit as well. I know there's some other first responders around the state have been hit during this, from the rear end during this event. So please slow down, move over, and if you don't need to drive, please don't. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. And next is Chief Nim Kidd with the Texas Division of Emergency Management.
Thank you, Governor. The Division of Emergency Management continues to host statewide daily weather and coordination calls with local governments. This morning, over 800 participants on that call. We continue to make sure that we have supplies for our warming centers established, and right now, over 142 warming centers still open across the state, with 62 still on standby. We've talked a little bit about I-10 in Kerrville, and I talked to the Kerrville County Judge, or the Kerr County Judge, Rob Kelly, and he's moving people off of the roads into the VFW halls and the warming centers there, Governor, so they're taking great care of those folks at the local level until the road gets open. Our winter weather resources can still be found at www.tdem.texas.gov. In addition to our webpage, we've aggregated all of the other agency web pages on our front page. And more for key messaging. While the precipitation has largely left the state, it's still going to be brutally cold out there. And so we really need to continue to focus on the 4 Ps, the people, pets, pipes, and plants. We cannot turn our backs on those that are in need right now. And our goal from here on out is to prevent preventable injuries and deaths. And we do that by not driving if you don't have to. I mean, you just heard Colonel Mccrall talk about the injuries and deaths on Texas highways. If we don't have to get out and drive, we can prevent those deaths. The next is we have people that are getting out walking around, and we have trips and falls and people slipping. And I know we have some head injuries in a couple of hospitals right now because of falls. Those are preventable injuries. If you don't have to be outside, do not be outside. And we've got to continue, I need your help pushing this message about protection from carbon monoxide exposure. Do not run a generator in the house. Don't use gas grills inside the house. And so those are preventable injuries and preventable deaths. And then finally, Governor, I want to re-echo so many of the thanks to our line crews that are out there. It is cold. It is brutally cold. The line crews up there working in that wind, trying to get our power back. We're thankful. Our TxDOT partners, our first responders, our county roads, our healthcare workers still going to work every day in hospitals. And then finally, I want to thank the working media. You guys are out there driving around. It's cold. Thank you for being here and helping us get our message out.
Thank you very much. We'll take a few questions. Wes?
Governor, just out of curiosity, how do you feel about those campaigning against last year's grid?
You know, our focus here, obviously, is we want to execute at this point in time of implementing all the laws that were passed in a bipartisan way. Both Democrats and Republicans supported the reforms that were passed, reforms that have led to a grid that is far more resilient. And I think it's important for everybody, whether they're involved in politics or not to go around fear-mongering, predicting the worst-case scenario, predicting blackouts and things like that. It's important for the public to be educated, like what we're trying to do, to let the public know that the grid is better than it was last year in very tangible ways because of the reforms that were passed. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing the grid perform by providing an amount of power that would have been more than enough power that was needed during the time of Winter Storm Uri.
This might be a question more for PUC and ERCOT. Could you kind of walk me through how, I guess, why the forecasting changed so much? For beginning of the week it was 71, went up to 75 at one point, and then obviously this morning actual demand is at 69. Is that something we need to be working to get more precise ahead of future winter weather?
So the forecast changes as we get closer to the operating day for several reasons. First and foremost, any forecast will continue to be refined as information gets better and we get closer to the operating day. In addition to that, we have taken the new position of using the most conservative forecast possible as another margin of safety. We want to prepare for the worst case scenario. In addition to that, this morning in particular, people are staying home from work as we've asked them to. Schools are closed, so those a lot of buildings out there that don't need power this morning, which contributed to the drop.
Let's go to Carr. Kate.
Obviously, you said this was a major icing event, one of the biggest icing events we've seen in decades. But with last year's storm, it was lower temperatures for more days. So can you just review the main things you're doing to make sure that these changes that were made, these positive changes, could last through something like that again? Because I know people still do have anxiety about it.
Sure. I will go through all the changes that were made to make sure that the grid is more resilient. But I first want to point out that the fact that because we have added more power generating capacity, that is what led to the grid this year being able to generate and produce more power than was needed at the height of Winter Storm Uri. That's a result of the state bringing on about 15% more power generation capacity as a result of having more reserve power than we had last year. It's a result of what the PUC chair mentioned about the winterization. 99% of all power generators in the state of Texas are fully winterized and passed inspection for winterization. As a result of that, and as a result of the maintenance operations, we had more power generators online at the beginning of the storm, and more generators continue to operate during the course of the storm. Also, more natural gas facilities are designated as critical infrastructure to ensure ongoing operation during the winter storm. Last year, there were less than 100 facilities that were designated as critical infrastructure. As of today, there's about 2,900 designated as critical infrastructure, making sure that those natural gas facilities are operational. And then another thing that is very helpful in that is the power generators are using, or at least have available, alternative sources on site other than, let's say, natural gas. If they were to run out of natural gas or not receive natural gas, they could tap into these alternative sources. Then I'll add this last thing, and that is we have multiple days' worth of natural gas in storage in the event that it would be needed. When you add all that together, as well as some other things, the power grid is more stable, is more resilient, and is better than it's ever been in Texas history.
We have time for two more, Bridget.
Yeah, TxDOT mentioned they're getting some lanes open
Sure. I'm going to let both Texas Department of Transportation and Texas Department of Public Safety respond to that.
Well, as the executive director just talked, the lanes are being opened right now. One is open on Interstate 10. We'd like no lanes to be closed. And every time a lane is closed and every time there's gridlock, there's more crashes behind that. So the challenge is, how can we quickly move those vehicles off the road and continue to get people moving? And of course, in instances like this, when you've got too few wreckers and too many crashes, and the conditions are so severe, and it's going to cause backups. There's nothing that can be done with that. I mean, they can de-ice all you want, and TxDOT does a great job before deploying that, but the weather conditions is what we're talking about. And that, unfortunately, when people are on the roadways, you know, in those conditions, and they're driving too fast, it just takes one crash to create a series, especially along Interstate 10 and some of those areas like between mile marker 500 and 511.
I'll just add to that, as I did note, we've got one lane open in each direction. We've had one lane open off and on throughout the night. The challenge that we've had has been really working around a lot of the trucks that, you know, quite frankly, shut down, and our personnel and sometimes law enforcement personnel having to bang on their door and wake the drivers up and to get them to move their vehicles. We've been doing that throughout the night, and as I mentioned, we've got one lane open. We've got, we expect to have both lanes open in each direction, but conditions, and it's really important, as the Colonel mentioned, to let motorists know that conditions are still going to be dangerous and hazardous, particularly overnight. And when we have these, this refreezing, the ice is very stubborn. We have slick spots that we try to work around, and it only really takes one of those to create a very serious crash and a very serious backup. But we've got a lot of personnel on site, and they're working to assist motorists that need help and to get traffic moving.
Thank you. Wes?
Last question, Sean, CBS.
What is being done to prevent accidents like this happening again with temperatures dropping below freezing across the entire state tonight?
So you mean tonight? So, I mean, I will take the first crack at it, and then especially have TxDOT respond to it. So listen, one thing that obviously happens whenever we have an ice storm like this, and we have so much ice on the roads and maybe snow coming down, one is for TxDOT to be out in advance, preparing the roads as much as they possibly can, and then going back and continuing to prepare the roads. But extraordinarily important, and that is to continue to remind the public about the necessity of driving with greater caution. Many drivers will come across areas of the roadway where they think there is no problem whatsoever. However, it turns out that there is what's called black ice under them. Here's what's may happen in some parts of the state of Texas today. There will be parts of the state of Texas that get above freezing during the course of the day. Ice is going to melt, but those areas are going to freeze tonight. And that ice that melts will then turn into probably black ice overnight. So drivers need to continue to be very aware of the hazardous conditions on roads and drive with extra caution for another few days. Do you want to add to that?
Yes, the governor covered it really well. The point that I want to add to that is in that location on Interstate 10, we have pre-treated that. We have treated it throughout the day yesterday. We're going to treat it again. But as the governor noted, with low temperatures, with stubborn ice spots, the roads are going to continue to be hazardous, and we really strongly encourage motorists to stay home wherever possible and to expect that you're going to hit icy conditions if you get out on the roads tonight.
Thank you all very much.
I'd like to know what you're going to do to make sure that money is spent to help improve the grid. Because they won't